Hi guys, it's Pavi. I just really wanted to jump on here this evening just to kind of clear up a few things, because I've had a few DMs from a few people regarding what's happening with WADA and kind of what happens from now in terms of the Jannik Sinner case. So I really just wanted to go on there. I've seen a couple of bits of information that aren't quite accurate, so I just wanted to kind of clarify a few things really. So in terms of where we're at with WADA, if you remember a few weeks ago, there was actually a misinformation tweet saying that WADA have actually passed the expiry time in which they had to appeal. And so a few people were saying, yep, that's the matter closed. And it circulated quite widely on X. And it was WADA themselves who had to clarify it to say, no, actually the rules state that if we're asking for additional information, we have extra time and we are still awaiting for some certain information. So that was kind of put to bed. But what that kind of tells you really is that WADA have taken a lot of time, a lot of due diligence and a lot of research into appealing the ITIA's decision. So it's not something that they've done lightly. Now, just to kind of give you a little bit of history regarding the kind of anti-doping protocol within tennis, it was actually quite a few years ago that WADA had outsourced the responsibility for the anti-doping program to tennis, and it was initially under the wing of the ITF, which is the International Tennis Federation, and that would basically have a small unit which would be in charge of looking after the anti-doping program. Now, in 2022, that all changed because the ITF thought that a new agency, and along with tennis, ATP, a new kind of agency needed to be built within tennis, which would solely look at anti-doping, but also other stuff like anti-corruption and, a whole kind of elements of integrity. And that is when the ITIA was developed, and it was developed and started on the 1st of January 2022. Now that was being funded by tennis, so ATP, WTA, all of the Grand Slams and ITF. Now, it's important to note that since they've been up and running, and it's a multi-million organisation, their turnover is about 17 million a year already in a couple of years. So, we're talking quite a serious outfit here. WADA have never disputed any of their decisions that they've made. And they've made hundreds in that period, whether it be anti-doping, whether it be anti-corruption. So anything that is anti-doping, WADA have got the rights under the World Doping Regulation Code to have a look at all of the decisions that the ITIA make. So the first important bit really that I want to reiterate is that WADA have not taken this lightly. This is the first time that they've challenged the ITIA's decision, and ITIA is a separate agency that has got the resources now to look at anti-doping cases a lot more thoroughly than perhaps the ITF used to back in the day. So some people are saying, well, are WADA now going to do the investigation? No. So they've already done the investigation. So they have basically looked through everything. So what they would have been looking at is the 33-page detailed document that the ITIA presented via the tribunal. Now, they would have had a look through all of that. They would have had a look at the history, and they would have had a look at kind of precedents in terms of other similar cases. And the one that kind of comes to mind is Stefano Battaglino, I believe his name is, who was charged with the kind of most serious kind of charge that you can get in tennis, which was intentional doping. Now, the reason why I say that is similar is this was also collectible. This was also the very same excuse used by this player as to why it was in his system. And it was also deemed to be a very, very small amount. Now, a few people have talked about, it's a small amount, it wasn't performance enhancing. It's important to know that the kind of ex-Portuguese WADA director has said that collectible can also be used as a masking agent. We don't know when the previous test was. So the fact that it was kind of small, it doesn't really make that much difference. It shouldn't be in your system. So WADA would have had a look at that penalty, and that was 4 years. Now, essentially, if WADA think that someone is intentionally doping, so that's someone who's knowingly putting a banned substance in their body, you're looking at a standard and a mandatory 4-year ban from the sport. That's kind of what's happened to Battaglino and a few of the players, lower ranked players, that have been found guilty of that. Now, what WADA have said is that they've said after all of their investigations, and they've been looking at this with a very, very experienced team, and I would imagine because they're overturning it, it would have gone through layers and layers. So normally WADA would probably have a junior person skim through the decisions of the ITIA, and they would probably think, yeah, that's not a problem. With this one, because there was issues that they saw that there was some negligence that they felt that was apparent in this case, it probably would have gone very, very high up the chain for them to overturn this, because what it does is it puts their relationship with the ITIA in a little bit of jeopardy. You know, ITIA are not going to be happy with this at all, but WADA have felt that they needed to intervene. So that's the important bit. So WADA have done their investigation, and what they have found is they don't have enough evidence to say that Jannik Sinner intentionally doped. And that is because they've gone on the story of what Jannik Sinner has told them. So Jannik Sinner has said, no, this wasn't me, but I've got an explanation for you. The fact that they gave an explanation straight away probably rang alarm bells for the ITIA, because they're thinking, well, if this player is saying that he's never doped and he doesn't know, how does him and his team know within 5 minutes, is what they said, that they knew where the source of contamination was? Remember, Jannik Sinner has said that he doesn't know, he didn't know that Giacomo Naldi, his physio, was taking this substance. Naldi has said that he didn't know that this substance was banned, otherwise he obviously wouldn't have used it. So how have they come to that conclusion so quickly? You know, it could have been something that Sinner ingested through a food or a medicine, or something else, but they seem to pinpoint the fact that it was from this massage almost immediately. So now they're being really, really diligent. But you think, well, if they're so diligent now, why weren't they diligent in the first place? So WADA would have had a look at all of this. They would have had a look at the history of Jannik Sinner as well. So they would have seen 2 years ago, he got rid of all of his coaching team that had got him to number 10 in the world. They would have seen 2 years ago, he was given a lot of sponsorships from Nike and from a lot of other big companies, Rolex, Gucci, Prada. He was under a lot of pressure to deliver, to become the world number one. He then recruits Darren Cahill. He then recruits Umberto Ferrero. He then recruits Giacomo Naldi. Now, what WADA would have probably ever looked at here is that Darren Cahill has coached players in the past that have failed drugs tests. Umberto Ferrera initially used to work with Filippo Bolondri, who has also failed a drugs test. And the third person was Giacomo Naldi, who used to work for the Bologna basketball team, which had an athlete that also failed a drugs test. So you've got 3 characters here that have worked with athletes. I'm not saying that they've worked with them and it was them, because it was never proven. But, WADA will be having a look at this and saying, okay, well, that's kind of, we're looking at precedent. So WADA would have had a look at everything. So when you've got people like Martina Navratilova and Mark Petrie saying, this is nonsense, why have they changed this decision? It's ridiculous. Anyone with a sane mind reading that report would have said, there's loads of question marks about the story, about the background, and it merits strong enough, because at this stage they cannot say Jannik Sinner was intentionally doping, because they have to believe the story. They have to believe what Jannik Sinner says. They have to believe what Giacomo Naldi has said and what Umberto Ferrera has said. And this was kind of, that's the story that they want to go with. But what they can do is, and what they have done is, to say, well, okay, if you're, they may or may not believe the story, but they will say, well, the story that you're telling us is full of negligence. And anyone can tell you that, because I can tell you the reason why. So this Umberto Ferrera is supposed to be, he's not supposed to be, he's a qualified pharmacist. Why on earth was he taking a banned cream to Miami when it was banned in the US, and he knew that it had a banned substance with clostebol, which he then gives to his physio, who he knows was massaging Jannik Sinner? Okay, Now that is huge negligence. This is an experienced healthcare professional. Now the other bit of negligence is Giacomo Naldi is an experienced physio. So he is a healthcare professional. Why is he, first of all, applying this alleged spray for 8 days? If it was a bad cut, you would normally seek to get it stitched. Everyone else has little finger cuts, and you'd normally put a plaster on and maybe some moisturising cream at the end of it. But he's insisting on using this spray for 8 days. So it must be a bad cut, you must think, okay? But then he is then taken the bandage off, has not put on any protective gloves, and he's then also said in the 33-page report that he's not sure if he washed his hands or not. And then through his pinky finger, they think that that's how this clestable has gone through to Jannik Sinner's body, because Jannik Sinner had lesions and psoriasis, or where that could happen. So you just think, well, that's huge negligence. Why are you having you doing that? And you've also got a question here. Jannik Sinner is having a massage 8 days. I get massages all the time, and you can tell if your physio or massage has got a cut or has got something on their hands, because those hands are then massaging your body. Are you telling me Jannik Sinner didn't pick up any of that in the 8 days that he was getting massaged? So there's a number of negligible occurrences that have happened that WADA have kind of looked at and thought, well, for us, we've made a decision here that there was some negligence. And it is a team sport. Jannik Sinner has often said that it's not just him, it's a team, and it's a very close-knit team. Now, the people that he's recruited, that he trusted, have made huge negligent errors. Now, whereas WADA have said, look, we don't think, or we don't have any evidence that there was any intention for Jannik to intentionally dope. But what we have found is that through him and through his team, which he has a responsibility for, he has borne some negligence, which is why they're requested for a term of 1 to 2 years in terms of being banned, because that's the standard. So if you're found with a fault or a negligence, you are to serve a ban for 1 to 2. Now, what we've got, and why I'm jumping on here, is you've got the usual kind of media, the very same media people that were so against Novak Djokovic for not getting vaccinated, vilifying him every time when he got to Australia. Oh, we're not sure about this. How has he got an exemption? Oh, this isn't against the rules. He shouldn't be even in Australia. He should be back. But they believe the sniff test. Martina called it herself. She didn't believe Djokovic in Australia, but she believes this story, that an experienced pharmacist has a banned substance. He decides to take that to America where it's banned. He then gives it to his physio. This is the same guy that's in charge of Jannik Sinner's anti-doping program. Okay, the same guy. He gives it to his physio. The physio's got a cut on his hand. He decides to massage Jannik Sinner without even putting any protective gloves, and doesn't even remember if he washed his hands or not. I mean, come on, where's the story there? But they don't want you to read that. They don't want you to know that. They're just saying, it's WADA have made an awful decision. They know, if they've read the report, they'll know there's massive red flags here. There's huge red flags. Mark Petrie saying this isn't a scandal. Of course it's a scandal. There's huge red flags here. If you look at all of the history, the last 2 years building up to it, you look at Jannik Sinner, after Indian Wells, he suddenly has a hip injury. He suddenly releases a statement saying he's got a hip injury. He might be out for a few years. No one's questioned him about the hip injury since. He then was set to go to Olympics. He's been saying he was doing a lot of the promotion. He's the ambassador for the Winter Olympics. He was expected to represent Italy. He was their big hope. A few days before the Olympics started, he cites that he's got tonsillitis. Okay, now this is a few days before WADA had released a statement to say that all of the anti-doping program at Paris 2024 is going to be very, very strict. It's going to be very, very rigid. Now, the difference here is the ITIA aren't responsible for the drug tasting in the Olympics. It's WADA. Okay, so Jannik Sinner has told us that he's got tonsillitis. 3 or 4 days later, he's on a flight to Montreal playing in the Montreal Masters. Okay, so WADA are going to have a look at all of this information, and so when people say, oh, there's nothing for him to hear. If WADA didn't investigate that would jeopardize their reputation, because everyone reading that report that was independent, that had a common sense, that had maybe been involved in tennis or had some idea of healthcare, would say this is negligent. And there's a number of stories and holes in this that doesn't quite make sense. So this is why WADA have intervened and have basically, they've already done their work. So now it's up to the Court Arbitration of Sport to preside. And what they will do is they will now get an independent, a new tribunal, so a new fresh pair of eyes having a look at this case. They will know that it's Jannik Sinner, so there's going to be no anonymity, I would imagine, in this case, because it's going to be a high profile case. But they will look through all the information. They will look at all the background. They'll look at the story provided. They'll say, is this feasible or not? You know, if they agree with the ITIA and say, actually, yeah, it's feasible, we don't see any negligence, then Sinner will then basically be allowed to resume and continue his tennis career without any suspension at all. But if they kind of believe what WADA say and say, actually, yeah, based on all the information, we can see that there's some negligence here, then they will issue a ban to Jannik Sinner between 1 and 2 years, and that depends on how serious they see the negligence. So if they see it as a high negligence, he'll be banned for 2 years. If they see it as a minor negligence, he will be banned for 1 year. But any sort of negligence is what they will see. Now, this is going to take 3 or 4 months. The Court Arbitration of Sport is only one sport law. It's the highest sport law in the sport court in the whole world. It's going to take time. It's going to take, they've said 2-3 months, maybe 4 months before they kind of get this hearing, because they're going to have to do the research again. And you know, Jannik Sinner is now going to have to cooperate with the CAS now, with new people that are going to have a look at this information. So it's a stress to Jannik, and it's a really, really difficult time for him. You know, as I said, I've always said, I don't know if Jannik Sinner intentionally doped. I don't. You know, I don't know whether this was his team doing it. I don't know whether it was a genuine mistake. But all I know is there is enough kind of things that are in here that merit, for me, some sort of negligence. And I feel that that's mainly, you know, if we go on his story, it's mainly for his team. And, you know, it's up now for the CAS to decide. So when, you know, what we're going to be mindful now is that we've got people like Martina Navratilova and Mark Petchey, and no doubt Andy Roddick is going to have his same, you know, and they're going to say, oh, you know, we're not sure about this. Why are WADA getting it? It's political. It's not political. Anyone who reads that report will see that this is not political. You know, had WADA not intervened here, they would have lost all sorts of any credence or any reputation that they had. So they had to do this. You know, this is their right. They have a right to appeal any decision that any sporting agency makes, even if they outsource it. So that's written within the World Doping Regulation Code, which all agencies that are outsourced have to adhere to. So, you know, I'm not massively surprised. I am surprised that the kind of overturn the ITIA decision. I think that is big, but looking at the information provided, I am not surprised. So, you know, again, it's important for me to get out there and put this message across, because, you know, I'm getting called every name under the sun here. Oh, he's misinforming. Oh, you know, he's telling us lies and telling us, you know, I'm trying to tell people how it is. You know, I've got absolutely no agenda with Jannik Sinner. As I said, he seems a nice guy, a phenomenal tennis player, and he's going through a very difficult time at the moment. So my sympathy is out to him, because he is now probably under the illusion where initially they thought it was all done. They're going to have to go through all of that procedure again, and it's not easy. It's not easy. So, you know, my sympathy is there for him. As I said, my whole reason that I use my platform is to try and make sure that tennis is equal for all and it has integrity, and that are the morals that I've been brought up on. And you know, it's got nothing to do with Novak Djokovic at all. You know, this is my opinion, and you know, it's a high profile case, and for me it kind of cites clear examples of bias and propaganda within the sport, and things that are happening for certain players that wouldn't happen for others. So nothing against Jannik Sinner. I'm just, you know, keen for people to know the truth. I'm probably not even going to talk about it much in the next few months, because there's not a lot to talk about. But what I will do is, if there's people like Mark Petchey and Martina Navratilova that are kind of hammering WADA and saying this is wrong, and then I will intervene. I will then intervene. But for the next few months, it's now going to go to the Court Arbitration of Sport. I reckon the decision will be known around kind of January, possibly February time. And, you know, who knows what's going to come out of that? Who knows what's going to go out of that? You know, that investigation may lead to more question marks. You know, who knows if you know, people's stories change. We don't know what's going to happen and what's going to come out of this. But what we do know is that tennis are absolutely furious with this, because it's going to mean more due diligence from an external body, which they don't want to do. You know, they don't want that. The PTPA have been asking them to be transparent with, you know, all of their finances and income that they get from tournaments, and they're not willing to provide that. So, you know, they like to keep things in-house, and the fact that it's being outsourced now to another department, the Court Arbitration of Sport, they're not happy with this. So, you know, they wanted the ITIA decision to stand, and they wanted everyone to forget about it and carry on. And that's not going to be the case, because WADA are a reputable company, and they've been doing this for years. And you know, if they didn't stand and did something here, then people would have been raising question marks about them. So that is it. Just over 20 minutes for me, which is pretty quick for me, but I just really wanted to kind of clear up a few things. I hope that answers a few questions and DMs that I've been having regarding what's going to happen now. What's going to happen now is WADA have done their investigation. They've given their recommendation. It's now going to go to the Court Arbitration of Sport. 2 or 3 months is when they're going to be making their decision, and then we will get a final decision from the Court Arbitration of Sport with regards to what they feel is the most appropriate punishment for Jannik Sinner. Okay, take care. God bless everybody. Look after yourselves and everyone else, and speak to you soon.